Hello, Florian here again. In this video I will show you how to set up a miniature Kubernetes cluster consisting of only one node. For this we will install k3s on a virtual machine. k3s is a lighter version of Kubernetes, which is also called k8s, hence the name. If you already have a running k3s or k8s installation, feel free to skip this video. So let's begin. This tutorial assumes that you have an Ubuntu machine set up. In my case, I'm using a virtual machine with Ubuntu 22 cloud server image, but there should be no difference if you are using Ubuntu 20, for example. And being on a virtual machine should also make no difference. However, if you can, try to use a clean install. Important is that you are able to run commands as root and that you have a connection to the internet. The machine should also be able to be addressed via the network, whether directly via IP or a URL. If you are running a machine with restricted ports, make sure that at least the ports 80, 443 and the ports from 30,000 to 40,000 are open. Not all of these will necessarily be used, but this way we are on the safe side. Okay, now let's install k3s. I will install everything directly from my home directory, but feel free to follow these steps starting in any directory you prefer. First, we create a temp folder for downloads and stuff. And obviously change into it. For the installation of k3s, there is an install script online, provided by the developers. We can download and run the install script using a single command. Again, we are using curl to download the file and then execute it directly with the shell. This disable traffic flag that we are using is needed as we are going to install a different ingress controller that is also the default for k8s and behaves slightly differently than traffic in some circumstances. If you don't know what an ingress or an ingress controller is, don't worry about it for now, we will come back to it later. To make sure traffic is actually disabled, we can check the service that we just installed for the corresponding flag. We can find the service under etc, systemd, system, and k3s service. And here we see down where it says exec start that we actually have the disable traffic flag set. If during this process anything goes wrong, you can always run k3s kill all, which will stop the service, and then k3s uninstall to start from scratch. Next, we need to adjust the permissions of the kubeconfig file, so we can work as the standard user. If you prefer, you can skip this point. All other Kubernetes commands have to be run using sudo then. So let's change the permissions so standard users can read the file. The kubeconfig file is available under etc Rancher, which is the company providing k3s, and k3s YAML. Now, if we have a look at the directory, we can see that the file k3s YAML is readable by all users. Okay, great. This is everything we need to use the cluster. To see if everything in the cluster is installed, we run our first Kubernetes command, which is using the kubectl command, and we just run get all minus capital A to see everything that's installed in the Kubernetes cluster for now. The get all command gives you all common resources in the cluster, and the -a flag provides everything from all available namespaces. So we see here we have things from namespaces kube system, but also default. Be a little bit careful when you hear get all, because get all doesn't actually give you all resources in the cluster. just the most common ones. The things we see here that are installed right from the get-go should not be touched unless, of course, you know exactly what you are doing. We will talk about the types of resources we see here in the next video if you are interested to learn a bit more about Kubernetes itself. The next thing we will do is install the Nginx ingress controller as a replacement for the disabled traffic controller, which is the one that Kubernetes itself also uses. To do this, we only need to run kubectl apply with the correct link of the Nginx controller, here version 1.70, and just hit enter, and it will download the definition of the resource and install it. Let's see if the resources were actually added. For this we do kubectl get all -a again, and we see there's a new namespace ingress nginx that runs multiple things. Don't worry about the specifics for now, but it is important that we see this service called ingress nginx controller. Okay, now let's see if we can reach our cluster from the internet. For this, we just type the URL or IP address if you don't have a URL set up to your machine that you are running the k3s on. For me, this is this URL. And as you can see, there's already a problem, which is to be expected in my specific setup. But if it happens for you, stay tuned, we will fix this now. What you should see here is actually a 404 page from Nginx, but we don't, we just get a timeout. This has a reason. Don't worry about the details, but this service ingress Nginx controller I showed you before has two port specifications here, and one is for the outside and one is for the inside, and for now it is using the outside port for our cluster, which is not what we want in the long run, but for now I can show you that this port is actually open. This is what you should see if everything is set up correctly. What we'll do now is adjust the ingress controller so that we can actually access our cluster with the port 80. For this we run kubectl. We want a resource that is in the namespace of ingress nginx. We want to edit something, and what we want to edit is the deployment called ingress nginx controller. This is the full definition of this controller. Again, don't worry about the specifics. What opened up right now is VI. If you don't know this, that is the standard editor of Linux systems. And to actually modify this, we have to hit I before we start doing anything. And what we need now is to find the spec flag, under the spec flag, the template. And here we have spec again, a little bit confusing, but just follow along. And for here, I just hit I so I can insert something. We add here host network equals true. That is already everything we need. Hit escape, colon, and WQ for write and quit. And now we added the ingress controller to use the network of the host we are on, so of this virtual machine. So now this internal port is also the external port. Let's see. And we see now we access port 80 implicitly because it is the default port for HTTP, and we also get this 404 page. Looks like an error, but this is actually what we are expecting. If this somehow went over your head, which is also expected, don't worry about it too much. This problem should not occur on a professional Kubernetes cluster, but going through this little configuration step will avoid painful subtleties later on when switching from our example deployment to an actual Kubernetes cluster. Great. This already concludes this part of our little tutorial series. In the next video, I will tell you a bit about Kubernetes in general, but this will only be a very basic overview. So if you already know Kubernetes, feel free to skip ahead. See you there. Bye.